Okay, what is going on, my broskies? My name is Toadski, back again, here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video, and we have a little bit of a data push here, data mines coming in for the next batch of characters to come out for Treasure Map. So Treasure Map is going to be coming out soon. I know that the Co-op Quest has just gone live, so I'll get videos out for you guys in regards to Co-op Quest at some point soon, but I want to talk about these new characters, of course continuing on with the memories of the Straw Hat celebration, which I know a lot of people are excited for, but I do think that this Franky is a very fascinating unit. So Franky, obviously, he is the new character to debut. We still need to get Brook. We still need Jinbei. So we're heading towards the end of the celebration, which is a good thing. In terms of the other units debuting alongside him, we've got a brand new Tom, and we have Iceburg as well. And then, obviously, because of the treasure map, we have the 6+ of the latest PKA released Arlong. We'll go through all of these brand new units right here. So Franky himself, artwork looks pretty cool, actually. This guy here is a Dex, Powerhouse, and Shooter character. Captain ability, though, pretty interesting. It reduces the ship and all characters' cooldowns by 2 turns at the start of the quest. That's really cool. I mean, a lot of people have been pushing for Franky to get more ship-related buffs for your crew, and they've kind of done that here. So he gives -2 cooldown to the ship. If you're on double Franky, -4 turns of cooldown for the ship. And we know that the new Shanks that debuted for the 10th anniversary has that capability to make your ship special max at the start of the quest. And considering how many ships have received specials over the past months or so, this is going to be more and more useful as time moves on. So the cooldown reduction is nice. Dex, Powerhouse, and Shooter get 5.5 times attack, 1.5 times health. Recovery and tandem slots are matching. The crew cannot be blown away by an attack, so that's also a little bit of an underrated mechanic. I don't think it's gonna see a hell of a lot of play. Like there may be some niche circumstances where you use Franky just because you can avoid blowaway. But you know, 5.5 times attack is relatively good. Like it's not the best in the game, but it's far from the worst, so it's pretty good. And then this added component is really cool. So if the crew uses a color affinity boost, you extend it by 1 turn. Again, furthering, you know, usability, the fact that like Shanks also has color affinity as well, so a bit of overlap between those two. And then furthermore, this is the cool part. For any character that has Barrier Pierce as a potential ability, and you meet the requirement for it to activate, reduces defense up by 2 turns when you hit it perfect. Now, this is really good. You know, characters like Legend Izo, like Ben Beckman and Lucky Roo have had this component in the past. Ben Beckman and Lucky Roo are still the best version of this component, but specifically for defense up, it's nice that if you just run Barrier Pierce units, as long as you're able to activate the Barrier Pierce, that is good. This does get me a bit concerned, though, because a lot of characters that have had Barrier Pierce potential ability recently that have debuted, they usually have really terrible requirements. You know, way back when, any legend that had Barrier Pierce would always activate at level 5, but more recently, they've added health requirements where you have to be above or below a certain HP threshold for it to activate, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is the same. I'm pretty sure the new legend Usopp that debuted last treasure map also has Barrier Pierce, but I think it's also based on having above 50% health, which is just terrible. So I'm pretty certain that Franky is going to be the same thing, so that's a little unfortunate. But captain ability wise, I think it's actually pretty interesting. So Franky's special ability is pretty cool too. So it reduces the special charge time of the whole crew by 1 turn. It also reduces damage reduction and threshold by 4 turns. So I really like that as well, because the captain ability is allowing you to remove defense up, and then the special can remove threshold and rainbow shield. So he does have ways to get around all of the components, albeit it is only 4 turns, which is not amazing, but there are other components that we'll talk about in soon that can extend this. He also will reduce ship bind by 7 turns. Not a very common debuff, but it makes sense for Franky. And then also gives color affinity boost, Dex, Powerhouse, and Shooter 2.75 for 2 turns. So if you use him as a captain, this is a 3-turn color affinity boost, 2.75. And then he further adds 150 times his attack in non-type damage on top of tap timing bonuses for 5 turns. This component is interesting. There have been other characters in the past, like the one that comes to mind straight away is like Legend Ein. She came out, you know, at a really weird time, and she wasn't really that great. But Legend Ein, if I remember correctly, had an effect that said that if you have tap timing bonus damage, you get like additional effects, because that's what Legend Zephyr did. So the fact that Franky adds this means that it could add some further support to some of the other characters that have debuted in the past. Furthermore, he does add 10% resistance down for Dex, Powerhouse, and Shooter, which is fine, it's whatever. And then also allows chain multiply growth rate alternating effects to be further buffed 2 times. So that's kind of neat. And then if you use his special 2 times in the same turn, then he further increases your chain multiply growth rate by 0.2 and also further increases color affinity boost by 0.5. So this means that it can make his special ability become a 3.25 color affinity boost for 3 turns. So that's kind of cool. And then also adding chain multiply buffs is a neat effect as well. As for his crewmate abilities, he does add tap timing bonus damage and also reduces his own special reverse by 3 turns. Makes sense because his special does give cooldown reduction. And then his other sailor effect will state that when a Dex, Powerhouse, or Shooter Captain activates their special, Franky gets minus 10 turns of cooldown because they really want you to use his special multiple times in a turn, but it doesn't also really make that much sense because it's a 13 turn cooldown, so you need to find some other way to give minus 3 turns of cooldown, which is the most frustrating component about the memories of the Straw Hats. If they were able to like access this double special launch by themselves very efficiently, then all of these units would be far better. But this is just a really annoying component this character has. And if you do launch him multiple times in a turn, you can remove, obviously, a lot more defensive effects, multiple cooldown, multiple resistance downs. And remember, because Franky is Dex, Powerhouse, and Shooter, he actually gets, like, all of these resistances are multiplicative in and of themselves, making him actually get a lot more damage increase, which is pretty cool. Now, as for the other effects, he does have the potential ability of every time you take damage, you get the increased buff, so it's the provoked attack. He does have the barrier penetration. You have to be above 50% health or higher, which is really frustrating. Hate that they do that. He does have Super Tandem, but this is very reminiscent of the Robin that just came out, where her Super Tandem is just straight up trash. There's no reason to use this. It's garbage. You need 3 units to trigger the Super Tandem, which is just bad. And then the Super Tandem is only a 2 times boost to Dex, Powerhouse, and Shooter. You do get defense up removal, okay, but for 3 units to trigger a Super Tandem for a 2 times bonus is just straight up trash. So very, very useless Super Tandem, unfortunately. And then finally the Super Class, which we haven't talked about yet. Now, you do need 2 of the listed units on the crew, so you've got the Straw Hats, of course, but you've also got some of the units from, like, Water 7. You got Tom, Iceburg, Yokozuna, which is the Frog, Kiwi, Mozu, Zambai, as well as Senor Pink also counts for this as well. Now, the effect itself does give minus 10 turns of cooldown to himself, like most of the other memories of Straw Hats, and then also reduces all enemies' damage reduction and threshold by 2 turns. So this goes back to his special, where I said before, it does remove 4 turns of Rainbow Shield and Threshold. Captain ability can potentially remove defense up, but you have the Super Class, which can remove a further 2 turns of the other buffs. So removing 6 turns is really nice. And then Dex, Powerhouse, and Shooter get the tap timing chain growth up to 0.6. And then Powerhouse becomes Super Powerhouse. Interesting that Powerhouse is his Super Class and not Shooter. Yeah, it really should have been Shooter, considering his Captain effect with Barrier Pierce. Really, like, Shooters are the ones with Barrier Pierce, not really Powerhouse units all that often. So that is a weird choice. But I think overall, he's just a fascinating character, and I think he'll see play, because Shooters with this Barrier Pierce effect to remove enemies' defensive effects, I think they're always going to be useful in some fashion. And then he does have his support effect, which only attaches to those Water 7 units or Senor Pink, and the effect says if you use a special of that supported unit, it removes defense up, damage reduction, and threshold all by 1 turn, and then gives color affinity to Dex, Powerhouse, and Shooter by 1.75. That's really good. Fantastic support. We'll see play, but it is a bit unfortunate that it only attaches to these specific units because there's just not a lot of representation for these units in the game. I guess Senor Pink if we get more Dressrosa support in the future, but as for right now, I don't think it's like the most broken thing in the game. Now, his Rumble stuff is also kind of interesting too. So in Rumble, he is shooter focused. So even though he's a super powerhouse unit, he is shooter focused in Rumble. And in Rumble, his Rumble ability will give shooter characters 6 health, 6 defense, and 6 speed. So that's already very good defensively. But then if any one of the Straw Hats are on the crew, then he gives himself level 5 attack, which is kind of like fine. It's not the best, but it's okay. And then the Rumble special on a 30 CT, which is respectable. For the first 40 seconds where he launches his special, he targets 1 high HP enemy for level 4 defense down, and then targets 1 enemy for 1 times attack damage 5 times. So that's the high HP enemy for defense down, and then 1 times damage 5 times. So shooters are renowned for doing this, where they hit lots of times, but for not a lot of damage. So this isn't that great so far. And then furthermore, it says if the remaining time is 60 seconds or less, all enemies get 2.5 times damage, which is far better. And then if 5 or more shooters are on the team, targets 2 high defense enemies, ignoring defense for 1.5 times damage. So Franky is definitely far better when you use him in the final 60 seconds, but either way you look at it, I think that it's just a solid special. I don't think it's going to make shooters that great, because shooters really need either like more half stats or just more characters that do way more damage. They're already pretty good defensively. They've got really cool ways to reduce their special CT, but they don't really have high damage characters, which is their main issue. So once they do that, they're going to be good, but as for right now, not really that great. Not really that great overall. Franky does have the resistance for damage over time, which is like whatever, and then damage reduction versus quick. So I think Franky's just fine. I mean, he kind of fits the role of most of the other memories of Straw Hats that we've had thus far. It's an okay unit, but it's not game-breaking under any sense. So I wish they did a little bit more to make him better, but at least he's unique in some aspects, which is nice. So we can move on a little bit more to the rare recruits. So the first rare recruit is Tom, who is a powerhouse fighter, also will be a dex unit. And I mean, captain ability doesn't matter that much. It does reduce ship cooldown by 5. That's kind of cool as a captain. But his special ability reduces attack down by 6. Chain multiplier plus 1.4 for 2 turns. Right column slots including block into tandem, and then reduces damage taken by 90% for 1 turn. If the crew has a duration of 2 turns or longer. If the crew has... Okay, there's something missing here. It says if the crew has something with a duration of 2 turns or longer when the special is launched, further increases crew's additive chain multiplier boost. Okay, so it's based around the chain. It further boosts it, except multiplicative. So if you already have a chain addition, you extend it by 2 turns, or if you have it for 2 turns, you buff it by 0.2 and extend the duration of your additive chain boost by 1 turn. So basically, you get chain buff, but if you already have chain buff, you can extend the duration and make it stronger. And then it says it will also reduce the top right character special charge time by 3 turns and reduce all enemies' damage reduction by 2 turns. This is a really interesting special. I don't think it's going to be that great outside of the treasure map that this event is going to be based around. This guy's just like too specific. The attack down reduction is nice. The chain addition is nice. Changing half of your crew slots into tandem could be pretty cool. 90% damage reduction is kind of fine. Like the first half of his special is fine. This secondary half is a bit of a weird one, honestly. I'm not a big fan of it, because like removing damage reduction by 2 turns, yes, I get it, you're supposed to use it with Franky and his superclass to remove a bunch of these buffs, but the way that I look at it, like by himself, it's kind of just average. He's not really that great. He does give an additional cooldown for himself every time another powerhouse launches a special, which is kind of neat. And then his support effect only attaches to Franky once per quest if the supported character uses a special, reduces attack down by 1, and further increase chain growth rate effects by 0.1. That's a great support for Franky, removing attack down. That's pretty dope. So it is a little bit of a shame that Tom only supports Franky and he doesn't support Iceburg as well, even though Iceburg doesn't have a lot of supports. Yeah, I mean, it's a good support. Franky will definitely find use for that. And then Iceburg is the next rare recruit here. His special ability reduces paralysis by 6. Dex, Shooter, and Cerebral Orbs, 2.25 for 2 turns. Left column slots into tandem through block. And then massively reduced portion of each enemy's dealt damage that exceeds 5,000 for 1 turn. So it's a damage threshold on your side of the crew for 1 turn. And then if your crew has additional damage at the end of regular attack, which is the tap timing bonus damage, and if it lasts for 2 turns or more when you launch the special, extend the duration of your orb boost by 1 turn and increase the orb boost by 0.25. And then it also says reduces top left cooldown by 3 turns and then reduces threshold by 2 turns. So yeah, like this additional half of the special is so odd. It's just, you're supposed to use these units with Franky. It makes a lot of sense, but outside of using them with Franky, I just don't think it's that great. He can potentially get a 2.5 orb boost for 3 turns, but in terms of the utility, you get the paralysis reduction, you get your own damage threshold, you get some tandem slots, and that's just kind of it. The rare recruits are very underwhelming in terms of the specials. And then in terms of the support attaching to Franky, if you use a special, reduces damage threshold by 1. Again, very, very good. Or actually looking at its damage reduction and damage threshold by 1 turn. That's even better. Yeah, Iceburg support's definitely going to see play attaching to Franky units just to remove enemy damage reduction effects is incredibly strong. So yeah, the supports are great. The units themselves, take it or leave it. Honestly, I'm not really that excited about that. Before we wrap up the video, we'll just have a brief overview of the new Arlong 5+. So this unit is a very interesting unit where he does different effects based on the defensive effects of the opponent when you launch the special. So let's have a look and see what they've done. So Arlong's special now will give Dex / a powerhouse -1 cooldown. He sets all enemies' defense to 0 for 2 turns. It doesn't go through immunity, which sucks, but defense reduction for 2 turns. Cuts your own health by 50%, but then deals 30 times HP lost in typeless damage to all enemies, so it can get around stun. He also gives your own crew damage threshold for 1 turn, so you can tank damage, because you're already cutting your health, so adding damage threshold is pretty cool. And then here we go based on what the enemy has. So if the enemy has Rainbow Shield when you launch the special, you get 1.5 times increased damage taken to the opponent through status effects. That's pretty cool, honestly. And boost the chain multiplier by 1.1 for 1 turn. That's a really good effect. So as long as they've got Rainbow Shield, that's a really solid special. And then it says if the enemy has damage threshold, then you get a 1,250 base attack boost for Dex/a powerhouse for 2 turns. And then after 1 turn has passed, you get a 1.3 chain boost for 2 turns. Okay, so if they've got the threshold, base attack, and a clock buff to get further chain buff in the next turn. And then if the enemy has defense up when you launch the special, you increase damage taken by 0.25, extend base attack boosts, and then it says after that, so after all of that has been calculated, Dex/a powerhouse get 1000 base attack, and after 1 turn get chain addition. So the way that it kind of works is that if the enemy has all 3 of those key defensive effects, Arlong provides a bunch of base attack, increased damage taken, and chain addition. But outside of that, like, you really have to depend on the enemy having those types of buffs. So Arlong is going to be niche. He's not going to be used in a lot of content. I must say the 5+ artwork does look really, really good. Big fan of that, but I just don't think he's going to see a hell of a lot of play. The fact that he can inflict increased damage taken through immunity, as well as give a chain buff, so long as the enemy has damage reduction, Rainbow Shield. So Rainbow Shield is extremely common, and being able to use this special to get increased damage taken in chain addition is nice. The only real downside that I have with this unit is that, you know, you have to bring him against enemies that have these specific defensive effects, but Arlong does not have the capabilities of removing any of these defensive effects. He does remove defense. He sets enemies' defense to 0, which is cool, but if they've got defense down immunity or full immunity, then that's not going to work. So he has to be partnered with other units in order for him to actually be super useful for your crew. So I just don't think Arlong is a great unit overall, which is a bit of a shame. And his Rumble stuff is kind of whatever. So, you know, we're just kind of trudging along at this point. We're just wanting this celebration to end so we can move on to bigger and better things. So Franky, I think by himself is a pretty cool unit. He's going to have great synergy with some of the other really good shooter units in the game with Barry, Pierce, potential ability. As I said, with Ben Beckman, Lucky Roo, Legend Ezo, for example. Potential, you know, partners with this guy, but also can work for powerhouse squads or just want to run those mono dex teams. But I think Franky's a really interesting unit. I think he's going to see some niche usages here and there. He's going to be a lot of fun to play around with. But that's going to wrap it up from me. Thank you so much for watching the video. Let me know your thoughts and opinions about this batch down below in the comment section. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to stay up to date with all the content I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. On that, guys, I'll see you guys within the next video.